crime. It is so great to see you today. I am so excited. Eleanor Kuhns is back with us. Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you for having me.
Now, for those of you that don't know, Eleanor is an award-winning historical mystery author who makes you feel like you've stepped straight into the past. Whether it's a Shaker village in 18th century New England or the palaces and the bull rings of ancient Crete, the former librarian and Minotaur Books Mystery Writers of America first crime novel competition. She won that, and she now spends her time dreaming up murders. um, and today we're talking with her about her latest ancient Crete mystery, Murder of Furies, and how she turns those ancient myths and meticulous research into a gripping whodunit. I am so excited.
Thank you. Thank you. This
Absolutely.
the research for of course, the Bronze Age Crete is far different than it is for Will Reese.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, before we get started, can you give us a quick intro into Murder of Furies, what it's about?
So Martis, who is now an established bull leaper, of course,
Hmm.
is on the team, and the minor prince from Egypt comes seeking the hand of the daughter to the high priestess, and the daughter who is expected to take the throne, from the high priestess. And he has already been turned down multiple times and won't take no for an answer. Shortly after the Egyptians arrive, the high priestess is discovered stabbed to death in her apartments. And of course, immediately the suspicion turns to the Egyptians. And but there are plenty of other suspects, including the high priestess's son, who feels that even though he's a man, he should take that position. And of course, Martis ends up in the thick of it, um, and having to not only discover who the murderer is, because of course there's not just one, there's several, but also figuring out how to help prevent the Egyptian takeover of Knossos.
It's a crazy story. I loved every word. So, can you tell us a little bit about Martis and how she got involved for people that are new to the series?
Sure. Uh, in my imagination, being a bull leaper would be like being a rock star today.
Mhm.
We know that the ancient Cretans worshiped the bull. A lot of sculptures, frescoes, murals, everything you can imagine. And we know from, again, sculptures and murals, as well as the Theseus myth, that they practice this right sport thing, kind of, where teenagers would run at a charging bull, grab the horns, and flip over. And it wasn't one of our bulls either. It was a different bull with much longer horns and that were faster moving. They are now extinct, apparently. So it was not a safe uh, practice at all. But Martis wants to do it. So she does that in the first book while she's investigating the murder of her sister who died at the altar on her wedding day. By now, by the third book, Martis is pretty much of an old hand, and it's starting to feel a little stale to her because she's done it so many times. And also she's 17 now,
Mhm.
and at 18, girls are expected to get married and settle down and have a family, and she really does not want to do that. She wants to have a more exciting life, although she's not sure what that means yet. But she knows she does not want to settle down and start having children. Fortunately, of course, there's another murder and more excitement, so she doesn't have to resolve that right now.
Now, I loved how you made Martis. I mean, she's so strong-willed and stubborn, but she's got such a great personality and so few friends.
Mhm.
How did you make her character be a part of the time, but still
Well,
herself?
I think that we know, or we're pretty sure anyway, that these teams of bull dancers were made up of 7 young men and 7 young women.
Oh.
And I think part of the reason that I made her such a stubborn person is partly due to my research for the first book, where, of course, you're reading a lot of archaeological journals and stories of excavations and all of that kind of thing. And an archaeologist male said, well, it can't possibly be women who were involved because women can't do that kind of thing. And that got my back up, especially since if you look at the Theseus myth, it's very clearly stated that half the team were young girls. And in a very famous mural, you see brown and white figures with the bull. And one of the theories is that the white figures were female, as the Egyptians do, and the males were the brown ones. So I felt that she would have to be stubborn, and she would have to be stubborn anyway to counteract a lot of the expectations. Because even though girls did some of this and they had a very high status in Crete, they still were expected to put all that away when they turned 18 and get married and settle down and have children. And so she had to have a strong enough will, I think, to resist that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, um, she has a lot of sisters, doesn't want to be the fashionable young lady. So most of her life and most of her social network become the other bull dancers.
Mhm. I find it like mind blowing that the bull dancers are essentially children.
Yes. I actually have had some problems with that because a lot of the libraries and a lot of people say, well, what age is your book for? Because the main character is young.
Yeah.
And it's not really a young adult book. Young adults could read it, but it's not really designed for them because, of course, in those days, I think they were probably younger than 16. I think they were probably 12, 13, 14. But we have to remember that they were married by 18, parents by early 20s, grandparents probably by their late 30s, because the life expectancy was so short.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I probably both be considered, way past our prime because the age at that point with which most people died was 40.
Yeah. So for in today's age, that would be like a mid-20s kind of a person and
Exactly.
personality. And
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, things were different. Even so, I could not imagine as a parent allowing my child to go into this really dangerous practice without protest, even if it had a religious component.
oh, yeah. And how did you come up with the religious ceremonies and all of that? It's crazy. Like reading about it, it was so interesting.
Well, I read a lot of what the ancient Greeks practiced, and of
Mhm.
course, it was quite different because they took some of the Minoan things, but it evolved. They took some of their gods, but it evolved. But we know from the seals, the statuary, the murals again, that they worshipped a supreme goddess. So I read a lot of material by women archaeologists who researched women in ancient cultures to give myself an idea of what actually some of these practices and everything might have entailed. Now, I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, that A Murder of Furies, I had to imagine quite a bit because, like, we know that there was a special thing to go into the Dionysian cult. We don't know what it was. It was a mystery, and it's still a mystery. Nobody ever talked about it. So I kind of had to imagine what that might have been.
That's crazy. Now, you mentioned the title again, and Murder of Furies. Now, does that come from the Furies and how does it?
Yes, because I felt that each of my books has a central theme.
Yeah.
That's true for Will Reese too. And so in this case, I felt that it was revenge. And of course, the Furies,
Yeah.
those ancient Greek Furies, that's what they did. They meted out revenge and retribution. I try not to have too heavy a hand, but And I also thought kind of, you have a murder of crows. It kind of fit, since the Furies were supposed to be winged and, very um, talons and,
Mhm.
teeth and very, very dangerous. So, but
I
that's
often
what
wonder
came
if the
up.
phrases go back that far and have just adjusted over time.
Well, that could be. We know that a murder of Furies was used in the Middle Ages. I not a mere murder of Furies, a murder of crows
Right.
was used in the Middle of Ages. So yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, uh, so that I try not to be too heavy about what I'm really talking about, but in this case, it was basically revenge.
Wow. Was there something specific that sparked your idea for Murder of Furies?
Well, I had had the idea for a while, um, and because I wanted to utilize some of the things that we know from the Greek myths and
Mhm.
that kind of thing, and of course, the Furies were fairly central.
Yeah.
But the actual germ came in a nightmare where I dreamed about the Furies. And when I woke up, I couldn't remember very much about the dream, but I said to myself, I have to use this somehow. So Martis and the Bronze Age Crete really aren't supernatural,
Mhm.
even though Arch as a spirit comes back to her sister. And even though there are the things I thought that they might believe in, like if a young girl dies before she's married and has children, and you have to go through a lot of ritual, otherwise her spirit will come back to haunt you the way Arch's does. But I just thought that using it in some way to point up some of the dangers and the of retribution and acting without thinking and everything uh, was a good plan. But it
Oh, it's
actually came
amazing.
from a dream.
That's crazy. So what has surprised you most when researching this ancient Crete?
I think one of the things that surprised me the most uh, was how high the status of women were, where the priestesses had a lot of power. The Wanax, which I talk about in all three of the books,
Mhm.
uh, was an administrator, and of course, I suspect it was the consort of the high priestess, a male who took over running the administration of this community, which of course you need for somebody to do. Um, and how quickly the high status of women disappeared. Uh, a lot of the resources that I read talked about the steps and the horse and
Yeah.
people who came down from the steps and who were very warlike, and it was very patriarchal. But it swept over the world, and of course, we're still dealing with it now. I mean, in ancient Crete, women owned businesses. Women kept everything running. They, in a lot of ways, ran the town, um, and they were able to keep that going for a while because it was an island. And of course, the people from the steppes had horses, and they were inventing chariots or wagons, things wheeled vehicles, but they didn't have boats and they couldn't get there. So this holdover lasted for a lot longer. So, but it's very interesting, and of course there are a lot more women archaeologists now who are trying to study some of this and not being just told, well, it was a man's history and women were just there, which was the case for so long.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me how you portrayed the power struggle and the jealousy of the men and what they were going through and how they felt to be subservient.
Mhm. Well, and of course, I address that again in A Murder of Furies
Mhm.
to a large degree, because of course, Egypt, even though women had a fairly high status, were still women were subservient to the men.
Yeah.
And this is despite one theory by a woman archaeologist. Of course, it's just a theory, that one of the reasons that the pharaohs married their sisters, their relatives, not only their sisters, could have been their, aunts, could have been their daughters, was that because of the holdover from the Neolithic times where women, they didn't understand fertility. So women were really the seat of the fertility and the children.
Mhm.
That was what gave the pharaohs the credibility to take the throne, was because they married the female in their house, and of course they all had the royal lineage. So
Wow.
I don't
Yeah.
know how true that is, but I thought it was an interesting theory.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Hmm.
So how do you balance the facts and your imagination? Because there's so little known about ancient Crete.
Well, that's true. And so I've tried to keep it as close to what we do know as possible. And of course, more is being discovered all the time. Um, but I think that if you see a gold seal with a female figure who's way, way, way taller than the male, you have to assume that it's a goddess, or and that goddess had a very high status. Because you think about classical Greek, Artemis was already a goddess, Hera was a goddess in her own right. They found shrines in Crete to these particular women. Um, and what happened? Well, Hera got demoted to the wife of Zeus, didn't she? So it really, a lot of the women and the power of the goddesses was severely diminished, you know, as it went forward. So
And hearing you talk about that, how do you come up with these names? I mean, they're so little known and the names completely fit the story.
well, that was tough. They do know some names. The name of one of the goddesses in Crete was Martis, a young maiden. So I just took the name Martis. Okay.
Mhm.
Opus and Ars are actually names from that period. But then I went into ancient Greece and I researched all the names. And it was interesting because some of them are a lot older than others, and I tried to take those names and use those. Um, and let me tell you, uh, autocorrect has a hard time with all those names. Keeps wanting me to change it to something else.
I can imagine. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, when you designed the hierarchy of where everyone fit, how did you figure all of that out? Do you have like graphs and stuff?
Um, well, again, I knew from my research that the priestesses had a very high status.
Right.
And we already know that weaving, which has been a feature of human communities from the late Neolithic right forward to the Industrial Revolution, which is a huge span of time, the weavers would have had a high status too.
Yes.
They traded all over the Aegean. I mean, the men who were the traders and who took the ships out carried all their textiles, and they've been found, remnants everywhere. So we know. So, in my opinion, I said, well, I would imagine that the weavers had a pretty high status, the potters, the people who made the things that they
Mhm.
used and that they relied on and that they used for trade. So that's how I came about with that. And we already know that they had gold workers and jewelry workers because of the jewelry. So a lot of interpretation.
Well, and you completely built a world. There's so much detail in what she saw, what she smelled, what she ate.
Hmm.
It's so fascinating to just read it, even apart from the mystery, which is good.
Well, I did research food too, because of
Mhm.
course we don't know if they had cheese. We don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
So there are some things, but we do know they had barley, and we know they had lamb and goats, and we know they had beef. But the other thing is, I will tell you, is that when I first started my writing career, I wrote science fiction. And what you do in science fiction is there you're building the whole world.
Right.
Here, I already have a lot of things that we know that I can use to
Mhm.
to use as springboards to jump off from. So, but I will say that researching Will Reese with many, many books and newspapers and everything is way easier, way easier.
But in some ways, it's probably a little harder because you have things that you have to keep the same.
Yes.
Whereas this, you could kind of let your imagination run wild.
Well, that's true. That is true. And I think that the Bronze Age Crete books haven't done as well. I don't know if it's because it's a more selective audience or people, it's so far away, people find it hard to understand or to have it resonate with. But in some ways, I found it a lot more interesting because what a different world. And it's true. A lot of it is true. I mean, we know they existed and that they had this society and they did bull leaping and they traded around the Aegean and they had a very sophisticated culture. I mean, they had indoor running water and toilets. I
It's
mean, how
amazing.
many hundreds of maybe even thousands of years did it take for us to get that back?
It's crazy, isn't it? And I find archaeology fascinating. So I love your books, but I love learning about the world that you created. It just completely, I cannot put it down once I pick it up.
Well, I do try to put in an author's note at the end too to tell what we know so far.
Mhm.
So, people can research it further if they wish.
So we mentioned oh, excuse you.
Excuse me.
Um, you mentioned the Will Reese mysteries and how, in some ways, the research was a lot easier. What are some other similarities or differences between the two?
Well, of course, they're both come from weaving families. Real Reese is a weaver, although his job is coming to an end because we're coming towards the Industrial Revolution.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I have to get a drink of water here. It's dry air, so bad for my throat. Um, so they are both weavers. I wanted to keep that because weaving is actually something I know about.
Yes.
Um, the other thing, of course, one of the differences though is he's a male and he's a middle-aged male. She's a young girl.
Mhm.
And I did that partly because I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to do another man, you know.
Mhm.
And I know that a lot of men will not read a book that has a woman protagonist. I am aware. But I just got tired of it. Even though I have a lot of women characters in my books, and of course, Lydia's in some ways more important than he is, uh, I wanted to do something, totally different. A
Mhm.
lot of people that I know, if they go to another series, stay in the same time frame. Well, I wanted to change everything. That's why, and I've been fascinated with the ancient world and ancient Crete forever. So it seemed like a no-brainer, really. I didn't
Mhm.
realize at that point, I have to tell you how hard that research would be. So I just saying,
So, and you've gotten to visit ancient Crete as part of your
yes.
or
And we're
ancient
actually
Crete.
going about back next spring
Mhm.
because we didn't get to see all of it. We did get to Knossos, and I kind of like to refresh my memory. And there are other sites from that Bronze Age period. Gorton, which has one of the first actual codified set of laws that we have a copy of. It's a stone tablet, if you will. And Festos, they're on the western coast, so I'm hoping to get to those to see what they look like. Um, and I want to get back to the museum, because I was so overwhelmed the first time. I don't think I got to see everything and really appreciate it.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, in addition to visiting, how else do you do the research for this?
Well, I should turn my computer around and show you my magazine collection. I get quite a number of archaeological magazines.
Yes.
Yes, and so I follow them pretty closely. I also have an online thing. It's called Greek Reporter, and they talk about current events, but they have an awful lot about current excavations and what's happening with on the islands. With all the things, and a lot of them come with pictures, and it's amazing what a clear sense you get when you're looking at a picture. You know.
Yes. I
So, and I get World Archaeology, Smithsonian, Archaeology Magazine, Archaeology Journal. I mean, and I pour through them. But I have to admit, I did a lot of that with Will Reese too, whatever was available. You know, that's why I like the old newspapers because you really get a sense of the world.
and how much of being a librarian played into your ability to research?
Well, I think that one of the things with being a librarian is when you research, you have to try to be as accurate as possible. So that definitely had an impact. But I knew about a lot of these things because of working in a library. When I do talks, I talk about the fact that New York State has access to all these old newspapers. And even though it's been there for quite a while, very few people are aware of it.
Mhm.
So, but if you're a librarian, you know about it. So I think that was very helpful. The other thing is you're very conscious of library loan, interlibrary loan. So when I was first researching my ancient Crete books, I got books from everywhere. Um, I used everything around here, all the college collections and everything, Columbia and all that. They would send me, if it was not a reference book, they'd send it up here and I'd look at it. But I got a book from Las Vegas. Isn't
Hmm,
that crazy?
that's
So
so
that I
cool.
was able to read and to look at. So that's the other thing I think that helps as a librarian. You're aware of some of the resources you can tap into.
Oh, yeah. And so, what's something that you learned? And I know I always ask you this, but what is something else that you've learned that just fascinated you for researching this book?
Well, I did a lot of research on ancient Egypt, actually, particularly Hatshepsut, who was pharaoh at the time when this book was taking place.
Hmm.
So in it, and it really was interesting because I mentioned that the status of women in ancient Egypt was actually pretty high, but I think there were only three women pharaohs, and she was one of them. And the theory now is that she was supposedly married to her brother Tutmos III, and his son, who was a son of Tutmos with one of the other women, not Hatshepsut, um, took her name, her cartouche, off all the monuments because this whole thing about she was supposed to have been a very wonderful pharaoh. She reigned for a long time. She was popular, but I guess he didn't like the fact that she was a woman. So he went around and took her cartouche off all the monuments. So we didn't even know about her until, fairly recently because there was no historical record. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing to me, especially how people can be, to protect themselves and to hurt others. It just really goes back to that, the jealousy and
Yes. And making sure that, you know, it's all about me, and
those political maneuverings.
yeah, it's crazy. They thought at first that it might have been Tutmos the Third, but he apparently had a great relationship with his sister, and they actually reigned almost in conjunction for a while. So they don't think it was him; they think it was probably his son Amos. So that I found interesting. I found that whole thing very interesting.
Mhm. And they had multiple wives and could have the,
Right. A lot of it was political too. Like
mhm.
they would get a wife from Canaan, for example, because they were trying to do political allies and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, but I think they pretty much what we would call harems, but they tried to have the successor to the throne be a child of uh, the pharaoh and his female relative.
Mhm.
Um, of course, we know how well that worked out because if you've seen some of the pharaohs and you know, yeah, not so well. So,
No.
but of
So
course, there was a lot of jockeying for position, and a lot of the minor princes fought hard
yeah.
to become the pharaoh, even if their mother was not the royal sister.
Yeah, and you point that out a lot in Murder of Furies,
Yes,
and how they're trying to, eh, in addition to coordinate with other countries, but to take the place and be the next pharaoh.
yes. I think the way I set it up, we don't know if
Mhm.
Egypt tried to this minor prince tried to take over Knossos. We do know they know each other and we're trading partners. But it seemed to me that a minor prince would cast his eyes around and say, "Well, who might I take over to become pharaoh in my own right if I can't do it in Egypt?"
Yeah,
So that was kind of the beginning of that thought.
yeah, it sounds very logical. So do you plot these out at the beginning, or do you just write?
I'm a pantser. I
Right,
write. With that said, I usually have a few touchstones that I want to hit.
right.
Usually I figured out that certain things are going to happen at certain times, but I don't plot everything out exhaustively. For one thing, I think it would be boring then, to me anyway,
Yeah,
because this way I kind of enjoy seeing how the story unfolds, what happens with the characters. Things come up in my head. Um, and a lot of times I don't even know who the murderer is until the very end when all of a sudden it comes upon me. I know who the murderer is. It's so and so. You know,
is that surprising to you?
sometimes it means sometimes I have to go back and rejigger the clues. But in
Mhm.
this one, I did know who I was going to make the murderer, but I don't always do that. In a simple murder, I think I changed the murderer something like 6 times before I finally settled on one.
Is what makes them so hard to follow, but easy to follow. I mean, because you can't always guess who the murderer is because there's clues for so many of your different characters.
Right. Well, don't you think that everybody has a secret?
Oh, yes.
I do. Everybody has secrets, and some of them are little secrets, and some of them are big secrets. So, if you're a murder writer and you think about murder a lot, any of those secrets could lead to murder.
That's the truth. And just because something would be a little secret to somebody else doesn't mean it's a little secret to you.
That's right. Exactly. It's very much so. And people take umbrage,
Mhm.
and something that may be a casual comment, off the cuff, can make somebody so furious and so enraged they stop thinking. I'm
Yeah.
sure that happens quite a bit.
Yeah. Way too often.
Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. Now, are we going to see Martis again?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a couple of people who really, really would like to have a fourth. I'm working on another Will Reese, so which, as I mentioned several times, are much easier to research. I'm thinking about it because we all know that ancient Crete, one of the things that happened was the volcano off Santorini exploded, blew out the center of the island, and there's still a caldera there. And the ash went as far west as Turkey, and it buried Knossos.
Mhm.
And they did start to rebuild, but they were a lot weaker, and the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece swept in. So I'm thinking it would be a pretty exciting book for Martis to live through the volcano
Wow.
exploding, and all of the things happening. So, and that would be right about that period. And then, of course, who knows? Does she stay and try to rebuild? Does she leave and then travel around the world? Who knows?
Yeah, I could see her as a traveler.
Yeah.
Absolutely. She's
And of course,
so inquisitive.
and her father and her sister are already somewhere. I
Mhm.
was thinking it would be fun to go up by the Black Sea where the ancient Scythians and the whole Amazon myth started. Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh,
And you choose
amazing.
into Amazons, maybe even become one. So,
It's so amazing. So, okay, if you could sit down with a historical figure from ancient Crete, real or legends, who would
mm.
it be?
Well, I think I would like to talk to one of the priestesses. I'd really like to have a clear idea of the rituals and the rites they practiced and
Oh,
how
yeah.
they thought and the beliefs, the real belief system. I've tried to put it together from what I've read, but of course, most of us are basically guessing.
Mhm.
So I think I would like to do that just to have a real idea of the truth.
Yeah, I loved how you put in the ceremonies and what you thought happened and where it happened. And it just is amazing thinking about what could have been and what we know.
Yes, exactly. And of course, I mean, we know that the even the classical Greeks would burn the hooves and the skin of a bullock, and the smoke would go up to the heavens. So we know they did a lot of burning. So I
Mhm.
included that, you know, but a lot of it is really interpretation from archaeologists and all that kind of stuff because we know so little about them. And that's part of the problem with a pre-literate society. I mean, they do have linear A, which has not been deciphered, but that's probably records of trade goods and stuff. That's what I'm assuming because so much of it starts that way.
And okay, so what about the snakes in their homes?
That we know. We know that the snakes were very important to them. Um, that they worship snakes, and that is a theory that the snakes, were like honored. And Crete does not have any natural venomous snakes, so the snakes would not have been dangerous snakes. Um, and actually, one of the things that I wonder is maybe the fact that the snakes were worshipped became the seed of the whole snake in the Garden of Eden story.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, because if the Minoans were not the only ones, a lot of the old uh, these some of these ancient civilizations were and the religions worship the snakes, and the snake was a symbol of wisdom and a symbol of
Mhm.
infinity, of immortality, if you will. So I wonder sometimes if that was the one of the well springs of that particular idea.
That's interesting. I never really had thought about it that way, but I have seen them in a lot of archaeological
Hmm.
findings.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, like the maze and the labyrinth and all of that, because in a lot of ways, I think it was a way to find their particular. They were polytheistic, so they would find a god. Some people worshipped Artemis, some people worshipped, Poseidon, but it was I think a lot of it was an effort to find their god, and to find that kind of religious thing because so much of their world was bound up in their religion.
Mhm.
It was really, I wouldn't call it a theocracy, but it was very very important in their daily lives. So
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I love having you with us again. Now, Murder of Furies has not been released yet, correct?
it will be available for pre-order on January 24th and will be released January 31st.
Excellent. I am so excited.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for visiting with us again. And we are going to share this with everyone because they are going to love Murder of Furies. I was so excited to get to read it myself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's always fun talking to you.
I love talking to you too. It's always a fascinating conversation. Love your historic research.
Thank you. I think
Thank
sometimes I'm a frustrated historian.
you. Well, I can't wait to hear more about the next Will Shaker.
Thank you. I'm still on the writing down notes stage, so Not too much to
Excellent.
tell as yet.
Well, we are going to check back in again soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, partners in crime. It was great to have you with us today, and we will see you again soon.
Very good. Thank you.